And our guest is already in the hot seat this morning. The Senator of the Republic of Kenya for the county of Busia is one Okiya Omtatah, and he's here with us this morning. Senator, good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Very fine.
Fine?
Yeah.
You've made it back from Busia.
Yes.
It was a busy week.
It was.
We'll get to know a little bit about that. But even as you're back from Busia, Dennis Aseto is back from Monrovia in Liberia, and he has a word or two.
Yeah, so we are in Liberia now, a country that was founded in 1822 by freed slaves from the United States under the American Colonization Society. Now, it declared independence on July 26, 1847, making it Africa's first independent republic. When we talk about Monrovia, it was named after a U.S. former president. And if you look at even their flag, it resembles the American flag. But let's go to the proverb. Words are like eggs. When they drop, they break. Words are like eggs. When they drop, they break. How would you interpret that?
Yeah, I think it's a question of controlling one's tongue. Mm-hmm. That you have to be responsible when you are talking. If you become reckless with your words, they're likely to boomerang on you. So I think the care with which you handle eggs is the care with which you are supposed to handle your words. Yeah, that's how I would look at it. But, in this world, at times you look at people and, you go to the marketplace and you look around, you find some people are selling stones, some are selling eggs, some are selling tomatoes, some are selling whatever. And each one has got its own culture. The culture of a person selling stones is very different from the culture of a person selling eggs. And that's how it goes in this world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very. The culture of a person selling stones is different from the culture of a person selling eggs. Okay. Some notes to be made out of that one.
I know.
Right. So, as we get into this conversation, Senator, thanks again for joining us today. And we're looking into where there seems to be political tides changing, or if the tide is rising or stepping back in terms of what is happening in the country and not necessarily what is going to happen. I think sometimes we run the risk of looking to an election without remembering that there's so many things that are happening in the country at the same time and in the meantime. And to take an outlook over all of this at the moment, whereby, things like Senate machinani is happening, county machinani is going on, where questions are being asked about spend, where things are popping up left, right, and center. We're taking an outlook on this and, really trying to continue to find our true north and pointing ourselves in the direction in which we ought to go. So as we get off onto this, just to hear your thoughts, first of all, as we start to dig into this, that how do things look at the moment? The last time we had a conversation with you, you said, there's certain things that we must do. Are you making progress on the political landscape, or does it still look a bit dodgy?
I think we're not making much progress because the political landscape is captive to personal ambitions and no credible national agenda. If you look at the president, what he's doing is about self-preservation. It's not about moving the country forward. You can see like the headline on the Standard today, where you're talking about this Nyota Fund. This kind of recklessness will not help this country move forward. When you look at the opposition sides, they're basically stuck with the way out. Nobody's addressing the way forward. So the way out, of course, is Ruto must go. That's the way out. The bare minimum is that you have to get rid of Ruto. But the way forward is not being addressed. And I hope that in the coming days, we shall see a bit more investment into the way forward. What do we need to do after Ruto so as to get this country moving forward and not stagnating or going back into the same hole? So we need to make a distinction between the way out and the way forward. But if you look at the discourse, mainly from the united opposition so far, is they are stuck with the way out. They think that getting rid of Ruto is a silver bullet that will solve the problems of this country. It is not. It's an opportunity to start. And that opportunity can either turn into a nightmare, or it can then turn into a dream being fulfilled. It can just so we must avoid a stillbirth. So we have had so many stillbirths in this country because we have tended to think that we have got messianic individuals who can come and be the Messiah and deliver us. For me, there's no Messiah. The law and an agenda will be the Messiah. So we need to craft an agenda behind which we can rally and push for the Kenya we deserve. That Kenya that is clearly defined in the national anthem with a roadmap in the constitution to that destination. So we need to get serious about that and get to work.
You think it's a unified position? You say Ruto must go. Is that a unified position from anybody who may be on the other side of the divide?
Well, those who support Ruto, it's not. For those who think that this country needs to move forward, including myself, is that Ruto is really a millstone around the neck of this republic. We cannot move forward with Ruto. We can only stagnate or go or decay. There are two ways of movement. There's decay and growth. With Ruto, we entertain decay. There's no growth with Ruto. So to get rid of Ruto is to stop the decay. But then to grow, stopping decay does not mean that you are automatically growing. And that's what we need to crack. How do we get ahead and then grow? So that when we talk of opposition unity, it's not about uniting behind an individual. It should be about uniting behind an agenda for this country. And that way it doesn't matter which individual will drive the agenda. But if you go to begin uniting against individuals, you begin either saying, I'm older than so and so I'm more entitled, I have sacrificed so many times, I've had this kind of career, I've had this, I've done that, and then we lose it. So for me, I'm really keen to see the opposition move from the way out to begin debating the way forward. How do we move forward? And it's very important, even for those who believe in scripture. Nobody witnessed the resurrection. When Christ rose, when these people arrived, they were told, Christ is risen, go, you'll meet in Galilee. Mm-hmm. He did not stand around the grave saying, okay, here I am, I've risen. Here I am, these are the clothes where you wrapped me. So we need to do the similar thing. We need to, where do we meet? Where is the Galilee for us? Yeah, so that when we get rid of Ruto, we have a clear roadmap. I think we are old enough to remember when President Kibaki came into power with an unbogable revolution. And then you had meetings that were titled, some were called the Nairobi we want, the Kenya we want. Kibaki already had power, but he had no agenda. So he had to go back and begin saying the Kenya we want. And truth be told, for me, Kibaki failed dismally because he had a united country behind him. The only thing that because he allowed the technocrats to run the country, he was sort of more a bit of a good manager, but he did absolutely nothing to transform the country.
What are you talking about? Everybody touts President Kibaki as the person who essentially stopped borrowing to a certain degree, that he set certain infrastructure projects in place that are still there till today. There was fiscal independence and there was fiscal accountability and responsibility under Kibaki. It's still touted to today.
But you got things like Angola listing happening under Kibaki. You have the return of tribalism. He was voted in on an untribal ticket. He brought back tribalism. So there are a few things that happened. For Kibaki, it's like if you have been in a cave and somebody lights a candle, that's the brightest light you have ever seen. But if you have been in a house lit like this house lit by electricity, a candle is not light. So Kibaki held a candle to us. But this country needs real electricity. He needed a really transformative leader to transform this country. He did much better than his predecessors. So compared to Moi, of course, he did very well. Compared to Jomo Kenyatta the first, he did very well. But where the country needed to be, in terms of fixing the social fabric, he performed dismally. He still embraced tribalism. He still embraced cronyism. Although he retreated a bit and allowed technocrats to operate. And the technocrats began delivering. That one I have to give him some kudos for. He worked against the handout culture. He tried to say, okay, if you want money, go to the bank, stop looking for money from politicians. He tried that. But he did not do anything seriously transformative. Disobedience of court orders still continued under Mwai Kibaki. All these things that we complain about, the vices we complain about, still continued under him. He never came out to crack on anything. To crack so that he could really be the transformative leader that says from here now, there's a new trajectory for this country. So he tried to manage the mess, but not to transform the country. He tried management, but not transformation. He was not a transformative leader. He was a fairly good transactional leader, but not a transformative leader. And so we need to begin debating and seeing how do we get a transformative leader who can begin doing things that really transform this country from A to B.
And Senator, even as Ndu jumps in with a question, I'm just curious. I've been meaning to ask. I know we'll go into the details of this conversation, the Kenya we want, the Kenya we deserve. But earlier you also said it doesn't matter the individual. As we're talking about the united opposition, everybody is fronting themselves. Your name has been fronted so many times. And I've been meaning to ask, are you stepping up? Because if people are then saying, okay, look, we know the Kenya we deserve. We know the Kenya that we want. We know the type of leader we want. We want somebody of integrity. We want somebody who is not corrupt. And if you look at the individuals, and the argument then can come out, if you look at all these individuals yesterday, we're being told, look, the same people who are in government have just jumped ship. They're now the opposition. Those who were in opposition now have jumped. They're now part of a broad-based government. So you have a united government and you have a united opposition. But at the center, there are individuals and there are people whose names are being floated around. Your name, there is former Chief Justice Emeritus Maraga. And did you say Matiang'i?
Okay, he's on the other side.
Oh, Matiang'i is in the United Opposition. Opposition has been in government. Where are you in this conversation? Where do you see yourself in this conversation?
I think the conversation should distinguish between the vehicle and the driver. Matiang'i, Enani, Maraga, and myself could be good drivers. But we are not more important than the vehicle. And the vehicle is the agenda. What must we do? What needs to be done to move this country forward? Okay. That's why I believe that we must seriously craft the agenda, get the vehicle, then the driver becomes secondary. If we go to look for a messiah, I'm not that messiah. I cannot claim to be a messiah. But if we have to go and look for a proper project and we agree that we are going to implement this constitution, and implementing the constitution means doing A, B, C, D, not just as a cut phrase that we are implementing the constitution or the rule of law, we go down and break down and say, okay, what does implementing the constitution mean in terms of addressing poverty? What does it mean to implement the constitution in terms of addressing poverty? What does it mean in terms of the elections? What do you need to do when you talk of implementing the constitution in terms of the elections? When you talk of implementing the constitution, what does it mean in terms of the future generations? What kind of plans do you have for the future generations? What are you doing today to ensure that the future generations will enjoy their lives in this country? Will have secure lives. Implementing the constitution, how do you control public money? How do you ensure separation of powers? The three powers being the power of money, the purse, the power of the executive, and the power of the judiciary. How do you separate these powers of adjudication, of execution, and of money raising measures? So once we agree with those things, like for me, one of the things that we must agree upon is we must slay the imperial presidency. And the imperial presidency is basically having executive power, an individual control executive power and control money. You get an emperor, not a president. And right now, if you look at it right from the colonial governor who was basically imperial, we have never had the true separation of power whereby the chief executive does not control the purse. Jomo Kenyatta controlled both money and power. Arap Moi controlled both money and power. Mwai Kibaki controlled both money and power. Uhuru Kenyatta controlled both money and power. William Ruto is controlling both money and power. And that is what to me, that's where the original sin is. That Parliament, which is supposed to control the money, then becomes a lapdog. Because the members of Parliament can make a budget, but the budget is no longer a tool for redistribution and development, redistribution of wealth and development of the country. What is the tool for redistribution of wealth and whatever they call development today is proximity to power. You need a close relationship to the executive for you to achieve anything in your area. In fact, the other day, President Ruto put it very well when he talked in Ukambani, telling Kalonzo that look at your brother Raila. Raila has acquiesced. Raila has joined the bandwagon. Nyanza is saying stuff. Join the bandwagon, you will see stuff.
In Ukambani.
Yeah, you saw the other day. So I think we need to slay that, so that if we take the money away from the president, put it in an independent treasury, controlled by Parliament through the budgeting process, then you'll find that the country will sober up, the country will begin paying attention to their MPs. The MPs will have a lot of power, whereby it's my fellow MP who will help me access development in my area. So they will negotiate during the budget process. Scratch my back, I scratch your back. And the president will perpetually lobby Parliament to approve his appointments, to approve his budgets. And that negotiation now will allow the country to be governed through reason. But today, the way matters stand, it's the whims of the president. Today, if the president was to appear in Busia, we have got 7 members of parliament and 1 women rep who sit in the National Assembly where the budget is done. You'll find all these people will stand whenever each one of them is given a chance to talk, they'll be asking for things to be done in their constituencies, to be done by the president. They forget that they had passed a budget in parliament, which the president has ignored, and now they have to make a mini budget, which the president, like a grant maker, will be able now to provide. And as they say, power, you cannot approach power standing straight. But the position to approach power is to bow.
But Senator, one would argue that the budget-making process, you look at the powers given to the August House, the National Assembly, they're the ones pretty much who go around the country collecting all these views and even passing that budget. The powers belong to the National Assembly. And when you say that the president is controlling the money, one would say that it is Parliament that has ceded its power and allowed itself to be controlled by the executive. Isn't that the case?
There was an element of that, and that happened under President Mwai Kibaki. That's when I say President Kibaki was not transformative. That particular thing was codified under President Mwai Kibaki, and that is Section 11 of the Public Finance Management Act. When they operationalized Article 225, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which requires Parliament by an act of which requires the Treasury to be established by an act of Parliament, they went ahead and they decided to use as a section within the Public Finance Management Act to achieve that. And they defined the Treasury as the Minister for Finance, the PS for Finance, and the departments. To me, that one was a cardinal sin, because when you get the Minister for Finance, who is appointed by the President, you get the PS Finance, who is appointed by the President. Both serve under the pleasure of the President. The President becomes the Treasurer. Another thing, you'll find that when you look at Article 225, Clause 1, the Treasury is not imagined as a ministry within the national government. First of all, the Treasury is supposed to serve 48 governments equally, the national government and the 47 devolved governments. Statements like what the president likes saying, that I've sent money to counties, are statements that are...
It's not your function.
That demonstrate that there is total lack of understanding of the Constitution. It's supposed to be an independent institution serving all these governments.
Is it a lack of understanding, Senator? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it a lack of understanding as to what the Treasury is supposed to do, or is it what we see as a brutal display of, being upfront about how they're a brutal display of control?
Well, it could be control, but I'm more comfortable looking at it as a failure to understand, so that I can give some benefit of doubt.
Okay, go ahead.
To whoever is doing it. And this has happened under Uhuru, it has happened under Ruto, it happened under Mwai Kibaki. In fact, I said it was caused under Mwai Kibaki, because when the Constitution came in, it was a big opportunity for President Kibaki to transform this country by implementing that Constitution. He didn't do much. He allowed the old culture to continue to the new system. Even the elections were still handled within the old mold. And remember the confusion that came about in 2013, whereby even had to go to the Supreme Court to determine who was the winner. Yeah. So it's because President Kibaki did not take action to implement that Constitution, which he sort of, with the President Raila, the Prime Minister Raila Odinga, helped midwife and they deliver. So when you get the Treasury the way it is now, as a ministry of the national government, you already undermine devolution. You destroy devolution. Because then devolution, the devolved units are dependent on the leftovers of the national government. Now, and then the other thing is that the power, what you have just said, Parliament has the power to make the budget. But the power to make the budget is only meaningful if you control the money. Yes. But you can make the budget, but if the money is already with the executive will ignore you. And that's what they do. They ignore you and do what they want. And even in the borrowing of money, you see like this 13 billion here that I'm seeing on the standard, that the World Bank is lending, which is another part of the trap whereby the World Bank and the IMF use the debt trap to control countries. So there's a debt trap here. They are giving money to Kenya, to West. Then Kenya gets indebted. Then Kenya gets controlled. So when you get things like this happening, and the law is very clear that any borrowing should be in the budget, and you find money like this being brought in from outside the budget, they are building up what you call the odious debts that are killing us. And that's why we are saying this kind of loaning will also have to be dealt with, so that the World Bank and Ruto will have to sit somewhere and deal with this debt.
So can I ask you a question then on this? Because if we're saying that there's a development agenda, and then also looking at, fiscal responsibility, and not all of those things make part of the budget making process, which is currently ongoing. What you're saying that then is, if a program such as this that has come up from I don't know where, it should have been in the budget.
Should have been in the budget.
So when Badi read the budget in July, for the next year, this Nyota program should have been in the budget.
Should have been in the budget.
And now that it clearly wasn't, we also know that you can borrow for development, or you can borrow to meet a budget shortfall, but not longer than 90 days. So that money should not fill a budget shortfall beyond 90 days, right? Those are the only two instances that the Constitution allows the country to borrow. Now, in this case, 13.6 billion shillings for this program. If it is not in the budget, to whom then will you be accountable for these funds of 13.6 billion when the time comes for you to answer any questions of audit?
I think this decision to operate outside the law is a major problem. And so when it comes there, I think for me, it is a question, this is a subject for rejection. When it comes to accountability for this money, President Ruto will have to account for this money personally.
To whom?
To the people of Kenya. And that's Article 226, Clause 5. It's very clear. If you are
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Beyond the gleaming skyscrapers, humming factories, kwa hizi mitasi ufanya biz na tech, zote ni backdrop tu. The real power drive in Kenya ni sisi, the dreamers. Sini wala sojituma, the doers, the innovators. Si ndio tunajenga future. Si utafuta unga daily, tujijenge na tujenge jamii. Our businesses zinasow seeds for generations to come. Bidii yetu ndio maendeleo yetu, na tunagrow hizi hustle from simple ones to solid ones. Tukitaka kugrow zaidi, we choose partners with solutions that get us there. Solutions that power progress, step by step. Your dreams zetu come true. You could also power your progress. Join Safaricom Business today. Power your progress at business.safaricom.co.ke.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Very simple. That's Article 220 of the Constitution. It's very clear on how you borrow, how budgets have to be done. So this kind of exposure of 13 billion is just falling into the trap that the West sets for countries to be able to keep countries under a leash. If we avoided this kind of things, this country would be very rich and it would be very far. And this is the kind of debates that we need to have beyond just saying Ruto must go. These are the kind of things we have to debate and address if we want to be a genuine opposition that is not seeking power for selfish ends, but seeking to take power for purposes of advancing the interests of the country. Then we must address these kind of things.
But Omtatah, let's just fast forward. I'm just trying to imagine we're waking up on a day where, let's assume Ruto is not the president. So you start going back to all this borrowing, and you're saying, according to our constitution, he's liable, and Kenyans can actually put him to account. How? What mechanisms? Because if you're talking about either money that has been stolen, the odious debt, for example, and this person is out of power, because what we have seen a lot of times is, and I'll give an example of what we've seen with governors through Senate. You will find, okay, fine, this governor has been accused, there's money that has been lost from the county. Then the next thing is it will be an impeachment. Then after that impeachment, the person is out of office. So it almost feels like that's the end game. You are hounded out of office, but then it ends there. Apart from one or two where we've seen cases publicly, Obado is just one case. But even with Obado's case, for example, the settlement from the properties and the amounts that allegedly has been stolen, you can't quantify them. You can't put them on a balance. If Ruto is not president, and we are going back to all these figures and all the other monies, how do you put him to account?
I think there's been no attempt to implement Article 226 Clause 5 as read with Article 40 Clause 6. Article 40 Clause 6 says that the rights to property do not extend to property that has been illegally acquired. And Article 226 Clause 5 says that we are responsible, where we are liable for any losses made as a result of our decisions, whether as politicians or as civil servants. When you read those two articles together, it is so clear how to recover this money. What is happening is that you have got compromised law enforcement in terms of culture of patronage and stuff like that. If you got leadership that really wants to rule by the law, and that's why I said when we talk of implementing the Constitution, what do we mean? In this case, when you talk of implementing the Constitution against the question of these odious debts and pilferage and theft of public assets, what do we need to do? It's a question of not negotiating. It's a question of recovering all the assets. If you saw the way KICC was recovered through an executive order, that's the kind of stuff you need to see happening here, whereby this stuff is recovered. You have had ADC lands. ADC lands have been grabbed. You know these lands have been grabbed. Like if you go to Kitale, a lot of grabbing has taken place. We have got papers and we've got a record of these lands. You need an executive order recovering these things. Let them go to court and do whatever it is. But let the land be recovered and returned to the state.
But they don't. And I think that's
that's why we need a political culture that is changed. So now once we have a vehicle saying that these are the things we are going to do, then we say who is the best driver for this vehicle. Who has got the guts to pull through this vehicle that we have. So what I'm trying to plead with people is that let us invest some time in crafting and thinking through the Kenya we want, what we need to do with agriculture, what we need to do in agriculture. Are we going to continue with the culture of saying that if we are subsidizing fertilizer, the government procures the fertilizer, the government warehouses the fertilizer, the government distributes the fertilizer? Or are you going to be smart and say, okay, if we are going to give subsidies, we are going to give a voucher. So you go to your nearest store and you pay part in cash and you pay part in the voucher, and you go and the government has just incurred the costs of acquiring, storing, transporting, distributing, and even bringing in fake material, because the market itself will not allow fake stuff. The traders will have a name to protect. So it will be cheaper on the government, it will be more efficient, and you get the proper product. So are we thinking through that way? So that if it is subsidy, we subsidize in a smart manner than trying to do all these things that are open to abuse and stuff like that. So when we come to these illicit funds, all this money that are being thrown around, we'll need to have the courage of the law. We need the leadership that has got the courage of the law to be able to implement the law as is without looking over the shoulder.
How far? How far? Okay, this is deep in the sense that, and I'll give an example, especially when it touches presidents, because we've seen a run around with governors who are like mini presidents in their counties, and it's been difficult. And we've seen how tedious the process is, even through the Senate. And then the easy route is going to court, get court orders, and the cases then drag on. When did Obado's case start? It started, what, 4 years ago,
Yeah,
5
4
years
years
ago?
ago, actually, yeah.
So around that time. So you have an ongoing case until people are so drained. An example is 2021, Pandora Papers were released. The president was out of the country at the time, Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, what the leaks revealed, this is the head of state, what the leaks revealed is that the president and his family had offshore entities, and this is linked to 11 offshore companies and foundations. These are not monies that are in the country. These are monies that are in Panama, in British Virgin Islands, and other secrecy jurisdiction. We know of conversations where a lot of the politicians are not even investing these monies in Kenya. They're investing this money in Dubai and other countries, and hiding money in offshore accounts. So we keep seeing this, and it almost feels like there's a way people have become smart to create avenues of, you're going to steal so much that the day you are arrested,
You use some to
you will use either a quarter of it. You budget. It's budgeted corruption. You budget even how much you're going to bribe. You know what I'm talking about. So my question is, for this person who's driving this bus, let's assume you're waking up to the new Kenya we want. You have a head of state who's looking back and saying, look, perhaps the accounts don't have money. Like we were told when Ruto and Gachagua took over power, and they said, look, we've just taken over government, but guys, there's no money. Everything was looted as we were busy counting votes and all that. What will this head of state then do to make sure you not only expedite, but you even get these monies that are in offshore accounts? I want to understand that process. How do you get it done?
I think you've talked of the Panama Papers. You've talked of there's also the Kroll report, which also exposed quite a bit of money. And for me, those kind of things tell you that the paper trail is there. This money is known where it is. And for me, it's even good because who do we owe these debts, these odious debts? It's mainly the Western powers.
Yes.
So if we call the Western powers and said, okay, we agreed this money was stolen, was taken from your nationals, was illegally borrowed. It's kept in your own economies there by these individuals. Can we have these people? Can we have this money paid off back to your people so that we get rid of these debts from our books? It is going to work. And because we'll have these guys, and today, the way the country has shrunk. You just saw the other day in Equatorial Guinea, the vice president, the son of Theodore, Obiang Nguema, the son, Junior. The French have auctioned these properties and they are sending the money back to the Equatorial Guinea. So these things happen. So once you know where the money is, it makes it very easy for us to recover, because we are not saying that give that money to Kenya. No, we are saying that take that money and pay that loan. This money came from this particular source. It's a loan being tied onto Kenya illegally. Can you please get that money which is in accounts in your own countries and pay your people so that you get Kenya out of the quagmire? That's basically what we are going to do. And some of their assets are also here. If they can't clear, we auction those assets and the repay of the debt. That's why I'm saying that the Constitution is so clear in Article 40, Clause 6, that the property rights do not extend to illegally acquired property. So the challenge is to prove that it's illegally acquired. Number two, so the question of negotiating that bring back a percentage or whatever is not proper. And by the way, something happened under Haji, the former DPP, where he turned the DPP's office into a clearing house for prosecution. The right to, there's a document called the right to charge. He took that power away from the police and vested it in the DPP, and the DPP has become a den of corruption. The investigators investigate, bring all their reports, and the DPP sits with these files, either suppresses them for years, or negotiates on which ones to charge, whom not to charge. Yet the structure should be that the investigators go ahead and they prefer charges against a person. The person takes a plea. At the point of taking a plea, if the person pleads guilty, the DPP has got no role to play. You go to sentencing. If the person pleads not guilty, then a prosecution commences. But today what we have is that without the supervision of a court, the DPP takes files from the police and other investigators and decides whether to go and charge or not. And now it has become a rent-seeking arrangement where the DPP is controlling a lot of money. They even have a slash fund called something, prosecution fund or something, which when you held against Article 206, it just doesn't fly. So when you have these kind of structures, that's why you get this kind of negotiations, the Obado kind of negotiations. You saw the other day, this former Nani Oparanya. What was the DPP trying to do? To drop a charge, the court had to say no.
Yeah.
If that case had not been produced in court by the time, the DPP would have killed that case. And that's why that decision to charge that was brought in by Haji must be dealt with, so that we restore the powers of the police to charge. Let them go ahead and charge. The DPP has got the capacity, under the supervision of the court, to withdraw any frivolous charges. But to say that the DPP, without the supervision of a court, is going to decide who to charge and who not to charge, is where we are getting this. Pre-bargains must be done before a court, not outside the court system. Because for me, a DPP is a prosecutor. He only acts within the court, not outside the court.
You see, Senator, you've mentioned something in terms of the Constitution and what it provides for. And I want to look at the process within which the country would go and get all these loans. Because if IMF and World Bank are granting loans to Kenya, one would have to look at what the laws of the land say with regard to that. But one would say that IMF and World Bank do not really care about the laws of the country. They do business with the executive. And with that, then you look at the law and the Constitution, and what it says is thrown out of the window because they are in business. So if, say, today you get to power, how do you then ensure that even if you will be borrowing at the time, that it is with regard to the law and what it provides for under PFM Act, just so we can get rid of the bad manners that has been peddled over time?
I think, first of all, there was a recent development in the US, I think 2 years ago, whereby the courts in the US determined that the IMF is not above the law. It can be sued by citizens who are affected by its decisions. And I think there was a case, I think from India or Colombia, I don't get it very well, but there was a case whereby the IMF had pleaded immunity. And the American court said, no, you have no immunity, you are not above the law, you are supposed to obey the laws of the countries and wherever you operate. So that particular case for me is a redeeming grace for this kind of impunity that the IMF has had over the years, that it can be sued, it can be pursued for its decisions, and therefore, in the global economy, it's not able to hide. Although it still exudes some impunity and likes corrupt leaders, whereby it can come in and trap countries through debt and stuff like that, it's accountable. And for a country that has got a very clear constitution and a legal framework, and also this case of Ali, if you remember the duty-free shops, whereby that tribunal in Washington terminated the case because there was a plea in the affidavit of Ali that he had bribed Moi, and the tribunal determined that bribing a president is against the public policy of Kenya. So you have got these precedents that show that for you to act and legitimately bind sovereign people, you must act within their public policy. You must act within their laws. If you choose to act outside their laws, you cannot bind those people. The reason they have the law is not for decoration, it's for protection from bad leaders. So if they choose to tangle with the bad leaders and undermine the republic cannot be bound to that. So the IMF has to be dealt with as an entity that must obey the sovereignty of these countries. You cannot just come in and disregard the law of the country and do things as you wish. You may have a president who wants to do that with you, but ultimately when you get to the point of saying we are implementing the Constitution of Kenya, the provision that the property rights do not extend to illegally acquired property cover that.
We all have a local role to play as well, because it's not just on African soil that the IMF goes about selling its agenda, right? Or that it's not just African countries that may approach them. But there are many a country who refuse to borrow from the IMF. They refuse to deal with them at all because there is a firm understanding in terms of how they operate. But there is an agenda for every country where this conversation is had. There is a local facilitator, just like it was during the slave trade.
Yeah.
People say that people came to Africa and took slaves. No. There were people here who were facilitating the movement of persons from here across the Atlantic.
Sure.
So there's always somebody here who is
Collaborators.
They're collaborators. They're local collaborators who are making this thing
We
happen.
even had the home guards during the Momo.
Exactly. So this is the home guard agenda, and it's that home guard essentially that either needs to be taught, rebranded, or removed. Number one. But then when we also look at the jurisdictions from where the IMF and other institutions hail, there is a system that is followed. And so when you bring in leaders, it's not based on individualism, but it is those who will continue moving the vehicle along. It's not the driver, like you said. And I think that's profound. That it's not the driver that people look forward or look toward, but that it's this vehicle, that all the parts working. Are they oiled? Are they moving? Do we need to remove a part? Do we need to buy a new one? How do you get the country to move from this idea of individualism, where it is one leader who is going to come and save or destroy everything, and then you leave the country picking up the scraps? Because that's where we really need to be, moving to that place. How do you get rid of this corruption? How do you get rid of this impunity? How do you insist that infrastructure is where it's supposed to be?
I think the street is where the things are, and I think we are doing very well on the Kenyan street. You saw the Gen Z uprising, and you see, like last night, the president of Madagascar has fled Madagascar, and
went to France.
Wherever he went, he fled the Gen Zs there, who are demanding those kind of things, demand those kind of accountability, that kind of proper leadership. So I think we have reached as generational. We have reached our sort of a point whereby the questions of accountability, questions of good governance, the questions of proper leadership, questions of accountability are being taken into account. But back to the IMF, we must never lose the purpose for which they were created. They were created to maintain a certain world order. The World Bank and the IMF were created to maintain a certain world order. And that world order did not include sovereign African or even Southern states.
Nope.
Did not include that. But I think for me, when I look at these organizations, The best answer for me is when I look at Germany after the World War. How was Germany reconstructed?
Through this money that came from, money that was taken on the other side, and they put it together and said, okay, well, let's rebuild. But it was not to necessarily make Germany better. It was to grab a hold of the global sphere to make certain countries stronger.
Yes, but the German people themselves did not depend on charity. The German industry, the German people themselves pulled themselves out of that whatever mess, and they even were able to get this money out of their economy and try to push it back. It ended up in the petrodollars and what have you. So, may I look at the way the Germans came out of the Second World War devastation as the way that today's countries in Africa today, even especially a country like Kenya, needs to look at that model and pull itself out, not looking for charity or whatever, but looking at enterprise and industry as a way of getting out. We need to see that we have rich people in the rural areas. We need to see thriving economies in the rural areas. How do we get there? How do we do that? We need to get our schools running. And the first thing we must never forget is that this country is not, our economy is not an extractive economy like the Nigerian economy or the South African economy, the Botswana economy or the Egyptian economy. We are largely a human resource economy. It's the Kenyan brains. And the human resource is a product of schooling. So for me, when I see the existential threat to this country, is when the schooling system is messed up. Today, there's no stability in the school system, right from kindergarten up to the tertiary level. So, and to me, that for me portends an existential threat that we may very, very soon lose our capacity to be able to use our brains to dominate this area. You have seen Kenyan industry in terms of service provision. Kenyan banks have gone out within the regions. They are doing very well in the region. They are getting a lot of dollars here. They are stabilizing this economy. We need to invest more in those kind of things and see how do we facilitate our private sector to be able to be a key player within the region, so that instead of even the government assets, instead of thinking of selling a Kenya Pipeline Company, I would expect the government of Kenya to be negotiating for way leaves with Uganda, way leaves with the other countries in the Great Lakes region, to see that Kenya Pipeline is pumping oil into Goma and dominating that hydrocarbon market. Instead of some do-no-gooders trying to steal it and privatize it and maybe strip it of its assets.
But Senator, the president over the weekend said all these efforts, you've talked about education, healthcare, you also mentioned it, and when I was talking about the founding father, then going all the way to former late President Daniel Moi, to his predecessor, and I mentioned Mwai Kibaki, his predecessor, and then himself, and he said, look, in the next 30 years, with all these plans that we have, because we do have a plan, we envision Kenya to be at the same level with Singapore.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm not getting to this level.
I've been kicking that can down the road for a long time, but I think the time has come for us not to say about 30 years to come or whatever. We need to set deliverables. And we used to have this 5-year budgeting cycles. We must be able to make achievements within the lifespan of a government. Within those 30 years, what are the components? The first 5 years, what should you achieve? We don't wait for the 30th year. Give us the 30-year plan, yes. But say the first year, we are doing this. Second year, we are doing that. Third year, we are doing this. But you see, the way they do here is that they give us 30 years as a way of telling us, wait for 30 years.
Yeah.
And then they tell us when 30 years come, it will be a miracle.
No,
That's
now
not
they've said
time.
give us another 25 years because
Yes.
it looks like Vision 2055 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is going to do those kind of visions will not work. When you look at the Asian tigers, I was even looking at South Korea and the way they used the postal bank of South Korea and the treasury bills as a way of letting people open accounts in this bank and loan money to government and grow their money. Here you'll find that even the treasury bills market is ring-fenced for those who have got a lot of money. You need a certain minimum amounts of money to be whatever. There's no deliberate move by the government to say that this person who can only save 2,000 shillings a year should also be able to invest in treasury bills. Say, go and open accounts in a post bank, and post bank will be the only channel through which you shall be buying treasury bills, so that when the profits are made and are plowed back, people grow their money. Instead, you find Kenyans are investing in the Ponzi schemes where they are scammed. They are trying very hard to invest. They have no tools of investment. They have no tools of growing new wealth. So those are the areas we need to crack our minds on and see how do we make Kenyans grow wealth from what they have.
And as you talk about how Kenyans grow wealth, Senator, there is the aspect of Kenyans themselves buying into what it is you're saying.
Yeah.
Because one would argue that you have a very great plan, but have Kenyans bought into that? Now, we talk about China. Look at what the Chinese people have done to change the economy in guidance with the leadership there is. Look at South Korea. South Korea donated money so that their economy would come up. Talk about Germany and what they did. Look at what Burkina Faso is doing right now in changing the economy. How do we change the conversation so that Kenyans themselves buy into all this and become the champions of the change they want to see? Because if we don't have that, then what you say pretty much will just be Omtatah saying it.
Yeah, it will be that. But you see, basically what we are trying to discuss is what they call the developmental state concept, whereby the state becomes the main tool for developing the people. Because we never had the benefits of colonization, the benefits of slavery, the benefits of all these things that the Western countries had. So what happens is that then the state becomes a source of, it's like a collective, collecting, pooling resources and investing. The concept of a parastatal today as we have it, and the parastatal is basically what has developed the Asian economies, is whereby you collect taxes, you invest in a sector, give it to the best of your people to do what that sector is supposed to do to build the economy. So you go and you are investing in, say, a parastatal that you could talk of a good parastatal would be like the cereals and produce, national cereals and produce, where you want to stabilize prices and maybe come up with policies for food security and food sovereignty. And you ensure that the farmer is fully protected in terms of their harvest not going to waste, in terms of all these things. So you find that if that parastatal is given, first of all, the board is competitively recruited with targets to meet, and the management is also qualified, you'll find that the Kenyans will buy into that. Because like right now, you'll find like if you go to Kitale, a bag of maize is going for very little money because of what do you have? This middlemen, or what do you call these cartels which come in to suppress prices, buy the prices at a throwaway price, then go and sell that same maize at maybe 3-4 times its value. So if the cereals and produce board was working as it should, with proper management, no tribal inclination, no cronyism and whatever, we would not be having that problem that the farmers of maize are having right now. They would know that there's a stable price that has been offered, even if it's subsidized. They will be and the whole purpose would be food sovereignty. They would mop up this food, put it in there, put some in the strategic reserve, organize, sell this food, and when there's a shortage, release this food to the market so that the prices of the commodity are stable, the farmer is satisfied, and all that. But now we take that Kenyan National Cereals and Produce Board, we pack it with a board full of idiots who are basically political failures and people who are hangers-on and looking whatever. We use cronyism to choose the leadership. Then at the end of the day, the cereals collapses for lack of proper management, question of management. So, and this has happened to all our parastatals. The Asian tigers, who set up the same parastatals at the same time we set up our own, gave their parastatals to the best people. I personally has litigated in court and gotten orders saying that boards of parastatals should be competitively recruited. You want to sit on the board of Kenya Airways. It should not be that you supported the president during the elections, therefore he rewards you with a board appointment to Kenya Airways. You should do an interview and tell the people who are interviewing you, if you are given a chance, What's your blueprint? How will you move Kenya West from point A to point B?
This is what happens across board, Senator. I mean, we had just last year, there were nominations for representation in Kenya's missions abroad.
Yeah.
And sad to say, we had an individual who had no idea about diplomacy. It would be surprising if his shadow darkened the four walls of a classroom that had anything to do with international relations. And the best that they told us is that they were able to manage a petrol station.
Yes.
And these are the people that you take to explain or to protect Kenya's sovereignty and or foreign policy around the world. Like you say, this practice of favoritism or rewardism that you give to individuals to run key sectors in society, is it a wonder then why you're not meeting the economic development agenda? Is it a
No,
wonder?
there's no wonder. The whole thing is scientific. If you become scientific about our problems, you will see that we are the cause of the problems. If you become superstitious about our problems, you begin blaming the white man, you begin blaming all those historical things, and you find that we are nowhere to deliver for the people. So for me, what I strongly believe in is that we must run this country with a balance sheet. We must give merit its rightful place in terms of appointments. If we want to develop, we must imitate the developed. There are no two ways to development. We want to develop, imitate the developed. Look at our banks. They are basically Shylocks. We must have banking that can allow people to grow wealth. Today, you go and borrow and look at the interest rates. You can hardly invest and move. So we must look at the West. What are the interest rates in the banks in the West? Look at even electricity. How is it managed in the West? Look at these amenities and whatever. So if we want to develop, we must imitate the developed. And there are no different scripts. If you look at even the communist countries, when they went to develop, and even the capitalist countries, when they went to develop, there were irreducible minimums that they did, which do not care whether you are communist or capitalist. You must do it. Efficiency of the economy. Even time, management of time. Things like an independent judiciary that can adjudicate the commercial disputes and things like those. So these are irreducible minimums. An efficient banking system. If we don't do that, if we don't imitate the developed, we shall never develop. There is no African way to development. That we are Africans. We are Africans. That's rubbish. We are human beings. And if we want to develop, we must do what others have done to develop.
There we go. And that is probably a place that we'll end this conversation on this morning, because it's something, because we kept saying, okay, so how, what? Is it a solution? Are there African solutions to Africa?
There's no African solution to development.
Should we do? No. There's certain things that they did. You want to be like Singapore? You got to do what Singapore did.
Not just yap around about Singapore. Go down and break down and say, okay, this is the skeleton. What did Singapore do? This is where they were in this year. This is how they got here. What did they do right?
And these are
did they hang the corrupt people?
To do. Yes, they did.
Did they hang the corrupt people? What did they do?
They didn't borrow from IMF.
They didn't borrow a dollar from IMF.
They did
not.
So, if we want to develop, we must imitate the developed. And for me, there's no African way to development. There's no African way to democracy. There's no African way to anything. Human beings are just human beings.
There you go. A senator in the Republic of Kenya for the county of Busia, Okiya Omtatah. It's not enough to do an hour. There's a lot to discuss and there's a lot to be covered. And so we're grateful that you do this with us this morning, and we're looking forward to the next time. Asante sana. A lot to hear from for Kenyans, and we look forward to having more conversations such as this. It's 7 minutes after 8 o'clock. Thank you, Senator. Continue with conversations after this. Good morning.
The following takes place from... This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.